Hey John, can I put enamels over oils? Thanks for that video, John. What if I use some other product rather than the one you showed? Hi John, could I do the same kind of thing with acrylics? Maybe what I need to do is a video about how do you answer your own questions. Now, I certainly don't mind getting questions. I love hearing from people. I invite people to ask questions, whether it's putting comments down below, hint, hint, to my videos, or contacting me through my website, through social media, or some other means. I love getting questions and talking with fellow modelers. Of course, the way I phrase that, you know that kind of like watching an episode of any Kardashian show, there's going to be a but coming along. Um, I love getting questions and talking with people, but I do think that in growing in the hobby, it's very important to move to a point where we start answering our own questions through experience, through logic, through experiments, and other things like that. So what I want to do in this video is kind of examine the process that I go through and some things that may be helpful for you so that you can develop the ability to look at things, to see things, and figure out how is that done. Now, so many of the questions that I get start off with, can I do this? Can I do that? And let me say right off the bat, you can do anything you want. It may or may not be successful, but I think in finding that out, you're already on the path to figuring out what works and what doesn't and coming up with your own way of doing things. So first of all, if the question starts off with, can I? Yes, generally you can. You can try it. You can see if it works. You can figure out if that's going to be something you want to add onto your model or if you want to do that on future models. It's a great way of discovering and learning. Now, as I break this concept down, let me start off by looking at why I think there is a necessity for just trying things out. Why is this important to me, to you as a modeler? Why is it important? The first thing that I think is important is it's a necessity for growth. Growth in the hobby, growth in how we do this that we do. And it's the same for any endeavor. There's all sorts of things, whether it's woodworking or horticulture or painting or repairing engines, any of those things, trying out new things helps you grow in that endeavor and become better at it, become more skilled at it, more versed at it. If you don't try things, you're not going to grow. You may get better at the base set of things that you do, but you're not going to go beyond that, if at all. But if you do, it's not going to be very quickly. So I think growth is an important factor in considering, well, why should I be experimenting and trying things out? Another aspect that's kind of tied to that last one, but I want to focus in a little more on it, is it adds to your existing skill set. It expands your existing skill set. If you're learning about methods of doing chipping, let's say you know one method of doing chipping, you know the sponge method. Well, as you start trying other things out, figuring other things out, then you have more methods to apply to your models, and it's going to allow you the ability to make the effects happen on the kit that you see in your head. And that's going to be very important in accomplishing what you want. So that experimentation process is going to refine what you do and give you many more tools in the toolkit, so to speak, to pull out when you need to do something. Now, another reason that I think this is a necessity to try things out is, to use a fancy term, serendipity, which basically means discovering stuff that you didn't know and you weren't really looking for. Um, Oftentimes when I've been trying things out, when I've been experimenting with things, I'll be heading for one goal. I'll have one thing in mind. But somewhere along the way, there is a reaction, there is an effect, there is something that happens that I wasn't expecting. And I end up at one of those moments where I go, oh, cool, I didn't know that would happen. And now I've either figured out something not to do again, or I've figured out something that I can do again that I was not in the process of even looking for, and I get a cool new effect. So that serendipitous process often multiplies our efforts when we're trying to find out, okay, what's this one thing that I'm really concerned about? You may come up with 3 or 4 things as a result of that experiment, and that process really pads your toolkit. Now, in my own brain, scary of places that is, I like to have kind of a mental process that I go through when I'm looking to learn something new or try something out. I love checklists. I'm a checklist kind of guy. And so having a mental checklist in place, or maybe even a formalized one on paper or something, can really help in figuring out, how do I do that? Now, the first thing I try to think about is, what's the goal? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Maybe it's something that I've seen in a photo or on a video, something that I've seen someone else do on a model. Maybe it's something on a real world object. And I will use those as kind of the impetus to figure out, okay, how do I recreate that? What is my specific goal? Because if you've ever done planning, you know that knowing what the goal is allows you to back plan from there. So it's the same way with discovering things in our hobby. Really focusing in on what is my particular goal in this thing, not just make it look cool or make it look weathered or make it look dirty, whatever the case may be, make it look chipped maybe, but to say, okay, how do I replicate that piece right there in that photo that I'm looking at, that particular piece of chipping or that particular piece of mud? There's a clump of mud and some of it's dried and some of it's wet and there's some grass sticking out of it. How do I replicate that? Having a goal in mind is going to be the first thing on the steps to figuring out how you do this. Now, the next step can kind of flow from the first. It may be partially rolled into the first, but there may be additional work after you determine what the goal is. But to do further research. Maybe it was research that started the chase. Okay, I saw this picture of this mud on this particular vehicle and I want to replicate that. Well, that's when I start Googling mud on vehicles, mud on tanks, mud on bulldozers, just mud in general. Maybe, go outside, find a construction site and go look at the mud that's on a vehicle, something like that. Look at videos. How have other people tried to do this? There are blog articles and magazine articles and all sorts of demonstrations of how others have done this. And when I'm doing that, now there may be, say, a video that I really favor over others, that I really like this one particular person, the way they do it, or one particular company's product or something like that. But I try to look at more than one source. I try to look at as many of them as I can. There have been times that I've seen a video done by someone who was very well known and had thousands and thousands and thousands of views. But when I scrolled further down as I was watching, there may be that video that only has 200 or 300 views where somebody's really nailed a method down and nobody's figured it out. And they show something that's really important to know that helps me in my pursuit of answering this question, how do I do this? So doing as much research as you can on what others have done, what products are available, is really going to help. Another thing that I try to factor in as I'm doing this research, as I'm thinking about how do I get to that goal that I've set, is as I begin to think in terms of the materials that I'm going to try on this to test out, does it work? I start thinking in terms of material interactions. Are the products that I've seen being used or that I'm considering using, are they going to have some kind of negative interactions between the two? And if so, how can I mitigate that? You know, if I've already got some enamels down and I'm going to be applying more enamels with more thinner, then maybe I want to put an acrylic coat between those so that one doesn't interact with the other. Or if I'm, thinking I'm going to use some lacquer paints over something, what's underneath it? Lacquer thinner is very strong. What's it going to go over? Is there going to be interaction? Am I okay with that interaction? Sometimes that interaction is actually beneficial in achieving what we want. Now, a lot of understanding of material interaction simply comes from experimentation, from learning. So in this process of figuring out how can I do this, it's not only figuring out how to do that specific thing, but you're learning things that are not part of the original goal necessarily, but as you experiment, you'll learn, well, this doesn't play well with that, or this does play well with that. And that adds up to the whole process being even more beneficial for you. Now, eventually in all of this process, you get to a point where you've got to start doing stuff. And I think this is the snagging point for so many people that contact me. Each week I get multiple questions that they have done, and they may not formally state it this way, but they, hey, I saw this or I saw that and it looked really cool and I was wondering how to replicate it and I thought of using this and I thought of using that, but I'm afraid to go forward with it because I don't want to mess my model up. Well, there's a simple way to get around that. You may have seen this before. This is my test mule. It's, I think it's a Hobby Boss 1/72 scale Hellcat. Now, I built this a long time ago and I had intended to paint it and I don't even remember why I didn't, but it ended up sitting on the shelf. Well, over the years, as I've needed something as a test bed for doing stuff, that's what this has become. I test out all sorts of stuff, decal applications, weathering applications, you name it. I put it on here. Now, as stuff starts to build up, I can sand it off, scrape it off, use some thinner to get it off, reprime it again, and just keep working with it. I call it a test mule. Having a test mule is a really great way to say, okay, can I do this? What's it going to do? And it doesn't hurt the model that you're working on. Of course, there's plenty of times that I actually test stuff out on the model. Maybe I flip it over on the underside and do something, or I try something in an area that I know, okay, if this doesn't work the way I want, I can either paint over it and do it again, or just add some more weathering on top of it, or something like that, knowing that I can recover from it. A great example of this is this little clip that I'm going to show next that is from a vlog that I do for Patreon and YouTube supporters. Twice a week, I put out a brief little vlog. It's 9-10 minutes each, and I just talk about something. Well, in this one, I was talking about building and weathering the Machine & Krieger Gladiator, and just kind of an accidental discovery I made when I was adding some weathering products to the bottom of it. Take a look at this little clip. When I got done with this, I was really happy with how this accidentally turned out, because what I did here was I applied some of the wilder textured product. Hang on, let me find it. Yeah, this fine light brown textured earth. It's just got a little bit of dirt grain in it and stuff like that. Well, I applied some on the bottom here and then just tested some various amounts of water that I wanted to thin it out with. And then before it dried, I thought, well, let me put on some Vallejo wash, and this is what I used here. Let let me just apply some over it and see how it changes the color. So I put it over it and saw how it changed the color, flipped it back over and went back to work. And later on, when I flipped it over again to check to do something else to it, it had this cracked effect. Now, there's nothing earth-shattering about what I did there, but it was a cool way that I saw, okay, if I use this product and this product in this way, it can produce this effect. Now, sometimes I've found where I do something and it looks like, oh, that works, and I go back later and I try it again and I can't replicate it. Maybe I forgot to do it a certain way. Maybe that was just, lightning in a bottle, a one-shot event that it just happened to interact. Maybe there was some other thing interacting with it that I don't know about. But sometimes those experiments of testing things out, like I said, lead to other things that give you more methods and more toolkits in your weathering and painting and building kit so that you're going to be able to achieve what it is that you see in your brain. Now, another piece of the framework that I would encourage you to use when you're testing is if you're not sure if something's going to work, even if intuitively you're thinking, okay, these materials should not work together, I don't see how this can get the expected end that I want. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to try those things out. That's where something like a test mule comes in real handy, because you can say, okay, this may totally destroy the model, but let me see how this works. Let me see if this does what I want, because that process, and more often than not, when I've done stuff like that I'll go into it going, okay, I don't think this should work. These products should not work together, or this method should not work this way. And when I experiment, more often than not, I prove myself right. But there have been a few times that I've found out, like in that clip, hey, I didn't know this would happen. So that can be useful, because not only can you learn something cool that you didn't know that you can now apply, but you've increased your material knowledge because you've figured out, well, here's something that it doesn't work, and I tried 4 or 5 different ways, and I know that product A and product B just don't play well together. So I'll keep that in mind in the future, so you don't use up time pursuing something that may not be fruitful. Now, in all of this, I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask questions, that you shouldn't, if somebody has cracked the nut, so to speak, on how to do a particular thing, I think, you do yourself a favor to just go ahead and say, hey, how did you do this? And that can short circuit this process. But at the same time, even if you get the answer, I think the process of experimentation has value in and of itself. It has a value all of its own. So even if you get the answer, I think trying out some different methods, experimenting with it, how can you further this? How can you change this? Maybe you don't have the products they have in their video or in their explanation, but you have some that are similar. How would those work? The process of experimentation is going to help you grow far more than the process of just getting the answer and applying it without knowing the whys and the hows and the whats and how everything works together. So both things are necessary. Asking questions and then just figuring it out. Both of them contribute to growth. Now, to start wrapping up, I think it's real important that I focus on why doing this, the underlying reason for doing this is what I say at the end of every video. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Ultimately, this is about fun, because I firmly believe, because I've seen it in my own work, I've talked to other people about it, I've seen it in other people's work. The more we know about the hobby, the more fun we're going to have in doing the hobby. It can be frustrating when we want to do something. We have an idea in our head, we see something, we want to replicate that. To not be able to do it can be frustrating. And that frustration takes away from enjoying the hobby. But when we start working on deliberate experimental growth, learning and testing and asking questions and testing theories and trying stuff out, it adds to our tool set of the things that we can do on our models. And when we can do more and effectively apply them to the models to achieve what it is we're seeing in our head, then I think we're going to have a lot more fun with what we do. I know I do. There have been techniques over the years that I would see somebody do and I wouldn't know how to do it. And then I would learn and work and test and build. And eventually I would get to where I could do it. I remember that many years ago when I first got back into modeling, I got a book, one of those how-to modeling books. And on the cover was a Spitfire. And I love Spitfires. And it was done, it was finished in a particular way. And I looked at that and I thought, my gosh, if I could do something like that, man, that would just be wonderful. Well, I tried to do stuff like that and it just didn't come out right. But I kept pursuing and I started breaking down all of the little components. And after a while, I forgot about that picture. And then one time I did a Spitfire and I was looking at it and suddenly there was a flash in my head, one of the few that I have. And I went and found that book again and looked at the cover. And I had done on my model what I had seen on that cover years ago. And that was a really happy moment for me to go, okay, what I saw here, I've been able to do here. And that really spurred me on to further growth, to further refinement of technique, to building more. And it all just, it's, what do they call it, a positive business cycle? It just continued to spiral up. And even to this day, you're never going to stop learning. And so the more you do this, the more skill you'll have, the better results you'll get. The better results you get, the more fun you're going to have. The more fun you're going to have, the more you're going to want to build. If you're avoiding experimentation, if you're afraid to move forward, you're missing out on a big chunk of fun in the hobby. And that's the most important thing, having fun in what we do. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope in some way it's been helpful. I know it's just a lot of blah, 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 And if you're an experienced modeler, you've probably not heard anything that you hadn't already considered. If you're a newer modeler, it may give you some confidence to try some things that you might not have otherwise. If nothing else, I hope it's maybe helped you drift off to a nice nap and you're just now waking up and ready to go do something productive. So, hey, welcome back. But thank you for watching this video. I am so very grateful. And again, I hope it has been helpful in some way. Well, I would be most grateful if you would hit the subscribe button down over here if you've not already done so, and click the little bell icon so you'll know when I have new videos out. There's also a place where you can drop comments down below, and it would really help me grow the channel. If you would drop a comment down below and maybe give this video a thumbs up as I try to break through the ceiling of that YouTube algorithm, I would be most grateful for that. There's also links down below to my Patreon, and there's a join link down over here if you want to join on YouTube. If you would like to support the channel, either one of those avenues will do it, and I would be most grateful for your support. And if you're already a supporter of this channel, thank you so much. What you do makes this possible, and myself and my family are so very thankful that you help us in this way because it makes it possible. We're so very grateful for it. Thank you. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.